Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is December 26th, 2025, and if you, our listener, are maybe in that quiet lull between Christmas and New Year's, a bit overfed, everything's moving a little slower.
Well, if you are, enjoy it, because as we've been seeing for the last 48 hours, the rest of the world has absolutely not taken a holiday break.
Not in the slightest.
Yeah.
And that contrast is really the perfect way to kick off this deep dive.
Yeah.
We were seeing everything from these life-threatening Christmas Day storms, one hitting the California coast, another battering the UK.
And at the same time, military jets are scrambling over the Baltic Sea. And then in labs, completely separate from all that chaos, there are these mind-bending scientific breakthroughs that just fundamentally challenge what we thought we knew.
That's exactly the spectrum we need to cover today. Our mission here is to cut through all that noise and give you a really comprehensive, rapid, but also thoroughly informed look at the most consequential stories happening right now. We've structured this deep dive by impact, so we're starting at the most fundamental level.
Science and technology.
Exactly. Because those shifts, the changes happening at the quantum level or in material science, they ultimately dictate where the global economy and geopolitics are going to land next year and beyond.
And from there, we're going to pivot pretty hard into that complex international political arena. We'll be covering conflicts from Ukraine to the Middle East, diving into the shifting structure of global alliances.
And then we'll wrap up with the financial realities and some major accountability stories that are really going to define the political landscape as we head into 2026.
So there are really three key themes you should hold on to today. First is just the incredible speed at which the scientific boundary is moving. We're talking breakthroughs in quantum mechanics, new states of matter.
Second, the escalation of global defense concerns. And that's not just on the ground. It's in orbit with the space race. It's on borders. It's in proxy conflicts. It's everywhere.
And third is that relentless, and let's be honest, often frustrating struggle for democratic accountability we're seeing in several key nations. It shows that justice, well, it moves at its own pace, doesn't it? And sometimes that pace is just painfully slow.
Okay, let's unpack that scientific revolution first. The lead story we have to talk about comes straight out of material science and physics. It's the discovery of a completely new state of matter.
Right, and it's not just a minor variation. This is something that exists right on the line between liquid and solid, and researchers have given it a name: the corralled, supercooled liquid.
I mean, this is more than just a cool theoretical finding, right? This actually challenges the very binary way we're all taught to think about matter. Solid, liquid, gas.
It completely does. The research teams, including one led by Professor Ute Kaiser at the University of Ulm in Germany, have actually created and observed this hybrid state, and they did it under these extremely supercooled conditions.
So give us a mental image. How should we picture this? It's not quite a slushy, is it?
No, it's more structured. Imagine a massive traffic jam during rush hour, and then suddenly, let's say a quarter of the cars are just instantly cemented to the road. They become part of the road itself, fixed in place like atoms in a crystal.
Okay, so they're locked. They're not going anywhere.
They are stationary, locked in. But here's the crucial part, the hybrid nature of it. The other cars, the rest of the atoms in this substance, can still weave and flow freely around those cemented cars.
So the whole thing can still move and behave like a really thick, viscous liquid, even though part of it is effectively a solid.
Exactly. You have the rigidity of a solid existing at the exact same time as the fluidity of a liquid. And stabilizing that state, preventing it from just snapping into a full solid, that's the real breakthrough here.
And the implications for engineering must be huge. I'm thinking about things like battery design.
Oh, enormous. Think about next-generation batteries or advanced electronics. If you can engineer a material that has both structural integrity from its solid part and, say, rapid ion transport from its liquid part, you've suddenly got a pathway to drastically improve efficiency at a tiny, tiny scale.
It also seems to connect back to other weird phenomena that we've seen, like those findings about supercooled water sometimes having multiple liquid phases at once.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
This corralled liquid validates that idea that matter, under these extreme conditions, it just doesn't follow our neat little textbook rules. It opens up a whole new way of controlling how things solidify, which is critical whether you're working in metallurgy, cryogenics, or even making pharmaceuticals.
It's fascinating. Okay, moving from the complexity of matter to the complexity of, well, us, 2025 also brought a major breakthrough in unraveling human ancestry.
Yes, and this provided clarity on a really key, long-standing mystery in human evolution. It's not just a minor adjustment.
We're moving beyond vague findings here. This is about, what, computational analysis of teeth.
Exactly. Advanced computational analysis of dental morphology, so the shape and the structure of our ancestors' teeth. And by modeling that, they found something that changes the timeline.
And what was the finding?
They were able to confirm that the lineage split that defines modern Homo sapiens happened approximately 50,000 years earlier than our previous models suggested.
50,000 years. That's a huge shift. That changes our whole understanding of early migration patterns out of Africa, doesn't it?
It refines the entire timeline of key evolutionary processes. It's the kind of adjustment that means, every history textbook is now slightly out of date.
And speaking of rewriting the textbooks, let's zoom all the way out to the entire cosmos. There's a discussion that's really gaining serious traction in scientific circles about the universe as a conscious entity.
And this is where we move from hard material science into some pretty deep territory, blending fundamental physics with philosophy. The emerging view, and it's driven by research into information theory and universal computation models.
It's the idea that intelligence might not just be something that pops up in complex biology, like on Earth.
Precisely. It posits that some form of awareness, or at least complex information processing, could be a fundamental, universal property of reality itself.
The concept of a collective or universal consciousness, right?
Yes, and it just completely reframes our place in the cosmos. It shifts the whole perspective from us being these tiny, isolated specks of life in a cold, uncaring void.
To the possibility that we are conscious beings inside a massive, intricate, and maybe even intelligent, responsive universe.
It's a huge paradigm shift. It's taking concepts that were usually reserved for philosophy or spirituality and grounding them in cutting-edge physics.
If the universe itself has a consciousness, it certainly reframes the high-stakes chess match we're playing in low Earth orbit. The space race is heating up incredibly fast, and China has had a remarkable year.
They really have. A year of both major successes and a few harrowing high-stakes challenges.
We all watched when the astronauts on the Tiangong space station were stranded for a bit after that debris strike, didn't we?
We did. It was on November 14th, a suspected debris strike. The fact that they got those astronauts back safely was a massive operational success, but it really hammered home the danger of all the space junk that's up there.
And it's not just a military outpost. They're doing real science. They found a new strain of bacteria up there, right?
Yes, a new, unique strain of bacteria aboard the station. So that's microbial life that is actively adapting to the extreme environment of orbit. That's a huge discovery in its own right.
But the real story here seems to be the pace of the competition. Reports are suggesting that China's Mars mission is now 4 years ahead of the current NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, effort to bring rock samples back.
And that is a clear demonstration of leadership in a very competitive field. Getting samples back from Mars is one of the holy grails of deep space exploration right now. Being 4 years ahead is a major statement.
This competition is also playing out in terms of security. There was an incident recently that really escalated orbital security concerns.
That's right. A Chinese satellite successfully observed and tracked a U.S. reconnaissance satellite that was operating in close proximity to the Tiangong station.
So a silent, tense dance happening up there.
It is. It's a constant test of surveillance capabilities and strategic positioning. When we talk about global defense spending, we now have to factor in orbital defense and reconnaissance. It's a new front.
And looking forward, China has an incredibly ambitious long-term goal: building massive solar power stations in space.
I mean, this project is monumental if they can pull it off. People are comparing it in scale to the colossal Three Gorges Dam project here on Earth. The idea is to capture solar energy 247 with no weather, no nighttime, and then beam it down to Earth.
Which would be a complete game changer for energy infrastructure, obviously.
Yeah.
It would reduce reliance on fossil fuels, but I mean, the engineering and safety hurdles of beaming microwave power to Earth seem pretty significant.
They are monumental. But it shows a strategic vision that is looking decades ahead, not just years.
Meanwhile, back on the pure science front, researchers are on a very different kind of hunt, hunting dark matter with dying stars.
It does sound almost poetic, doesn't it?
It does. So why old dying stars? Why are they the perfect laboratory for this particular search?
Well, scientists are looking at the remnants of these old stars to try and find evidence of axions. Axions are one of the leading theoretical candidates for dark matter, the invisible stuff that makes up about 85% of the mass in the universe.
And old stars are ideal because of their composition?
Exactly. When a star gets old and enters its final stages, it burns through most of its complex, noisy elements, especially hydrogen. What you're left with is a much simpler, super dense remnant, a stellar corpse, basically.
And that simplifies the search.
Radically. The absence of all that noise from massive fusion reactions makes it much, much easier to spot the very subtle, very faint signatures that these elusive dark matter candidates might leave behind.
So these old stars are like the universe's natural vacuum cleaners. They burn away all the noisy hydrogen so scientists can get a clearer signal. It's about spotting a tiny quantum interaction in a very simplified magnetic field.
Precisely. If axions exist, they should interact with those fields in a very specific, measurable way, and these stellar remnants give us the best possible signal-to-noise ratio to actually detect that.
Amazing. And finally, for this segment, the cosmos gave us a few holiday gifts here on Earth. We had some beautiful celestial events and space weather.
We did. On December 26th itself, stargazers had a great opportunity to see the conjunction of the Moon and Saturn. They were shining really close together in the southern sky just after sunset. A great naked eye event.
A nice reminder of the clockwork of the solar system. And we also got some northern lights, didn't we?
Yes, thanks to some unsettled space weather, some solar activity. We had a stunning Christmas Eve aurora borealis that was visible much further south than usual, right across several U.S. states. It's always a magical thing to see.
And looking ahead, 2026 is going to be a big year for sky watchers.
A huge year. We have to mention the total solar eclipse. Portugal is being pointed to as a prime viewing spot for that one. And on top of that, there's a unique and spectacular 6-planet alignment happening in February 2026. A great time to be an astronomer, amateur, or professional.
All right, let's move from the largest celestial bodies to the smallest things we can manufacture. The speed of technological advancement on Earth right now is just dizzying. First stop, quantum mechanics, and a huge step toward making this tech scalable. We're talking real, tangible quantum leaps.
This is genuinely a revolutionary step in miniaturizing quantum computing. Researchers have unveiled a new device that is the size of a microchip, and that is a foundational shift away from the current, cumbersome, room-sized superconducting systems that we have to use today.
The miniaturization is everything, isn't it? It's what takes quantum computing out of these super specialized labs and into the realm of, potential commercial use. What's the secret sauce in this chip? What makes it so efficient?
A couple of key things. First, they designed it using standard manufacturing processes. That right there solves the biggest hurdle, which has always been scalability and cost. But more importantly, it addresses the core weakness of quantum systems.
The fragility of the qubits.
Exactly. The qubits, the basic unit of quantum information, are just so prone to errors from any environmental noise. This team demonstrated a new all-microwave technique for error suppression.
And that process, what, it uses less power?
It drastically reduces power consumption, which lets the chip operate much more efficiently. And they were able to demonstrate an error suppression factor of 1.4.
Now, 1.4 might sound small to a layperson, but in the world of quantum error correction, any reduction in that instability without adding a ton of size or complexity is the whole ballgame, isn't it?
It is paramount. This brings us significantly closer to a future where quantum systems could just blow classical computers out of the water for things like complex simulations, drug discovery, or logistics.
So if quantum is the future of calculation, then altermagnets might just be the future of memory. The confirmed existence of this new class of magnetic materials is really reshaping the field of spintronics.
It is, and for our listeners, spintronics is all about using an electron's spin, its intrinsic angular momentum, to carry information, not just its charge like in normal electronics, and that promises much faster, much lower power devices.
So what makes altermagnets so special? Things like the ultra-thin ruthenium dioxide films they're talking about.
It's their unique crystal symmetries. They function, and this is the key, without net magnetization.
So they're magnetic, but they don't have that external magnetic field like, say, the magnet holding a shopping list to your fridge door.
Exactly right. This hidden form of magnetism is the breakthrough. Because there's no net external field, they have this incredible stable resistance to interference. You can pack them incredibly close together in a memory chip without them messing with each other.
Which means higher density.
Higher density, and it also allows for incredibly rapid electrical readout. So you get less interference, higher density, and massive improvements in speed and energy efficiency. It's the trifecta that could completely revolutionize computer memory.
And that intersection of AI and materials brings us to the massive physical infrastructure you need to support it all. Data centers are center stage. In 2025, these places really shifted from being a back-end utility to being the absolute epicenters of the digital world.
And that growth, which is being driven exponentially by generative AI models, comes with a pretty stark warning from the IEA, the International Energy Agency.
I saw this. They're projecting that electricity usage from data centers could double by 2030.
Double. Rising from the current 415 terawatt hours. I mean, that's equivalent to the entire power consumption of several mid-sized countries. It's a staggering amount of energy.
But here's a critical question. Are those IEA models really factoring in the parallel explosion in chip efficiency? I mean, we just talked about quantum leaps.
Yeah.
Are they calculating based on today's classical infrastructure, or are they accounting for these breakthroughs?
It's a fantastic question. The IEA says they acknowledge efficiency gains, but they argue that the sheer volume of computational demand, the global race to train ever larger AI models, is just completely overwhelming those efficiency improvements for now.
So companies are just pouring billions into building out this infrastructure as fast as possible.
As fast as possible, and that often means prioritizing the speed of the build-out over long-term energy sustainability. And that, of course, raises serious concerns about the environmental footprint and the pressure it puts on local power grids.
The physical world has to race to keep up with the software, which leads us right to the dark side of this digital revolution, the cybersecurity landscape of 2025.
Yeah, the sources on this are pretty clear. A new Chubb report found that cyber risks are now seen as the leading threat to business growth.
The leading threat, more than economic disruption or technological obsolescence.
More than anything else. It's a profound statement, isn't it? The risk of being attacked is now perceived as greater than the risk of being out-innovated. And that's because the threats are becoming so much more sophisticated, mostly because of AI-driven attack vectors.
So hackers are using AI to automate and tailor their attacks.
In real time, making zero-day attacks and massive data breaches much easier to pull off. The defense, of course, is to fight AI with AI. You see firms like Bitdefender integrating AI-infused threat intelligence to try and predict and stop breaches before they happen.
But at the end of the day, the ultimate firewall is still human, isn't it?
It often is. The sources really emphasize the growing need for continuous employee awareness training to combat sophisticated phishing and social engineering attacks. The human element is still the easiest way in, especially when AI tools can now generate perfectly tailored, personalized scam emails or messages.
All right, let's bring it down from the massive, invisible threat to the tech that's literally on our faces. A quick look at consumer tech in daily life. Smart glasses, like the Meta Ray-Ban Gen 2 or the X-Real 1 Pro, are becoming much more mainstream.
They are offering augmented reality GPS, hands-free operation, but it brings that classic trade-off right to the forefront. Convenience versus privacy and security.
These things have persistent cameras, location tracking. It raises all sorts of concerns about data security and surveillance.
And users really have to be vigilant as these become more common to understand where their personal data is going and how it's being stored.
We also saw a real-world stress test of translation tools. Apple's live translation feature for Japanese was reviewed over in Tokyo.
And the verdict was pretty much what you'd expect. It was highly effective for basic transactional stuff, ordering food, asking for directions. But the minute it ran into nuanced, regional, or idiomatic language, it really struggled.
So it's a great utility tool, but it's not a replacement for actual human fluency or cultural understanding. Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. And finally, a small, but for some people, life-changing bit of tech news. Gmail flexibility. Google has finally started rolling out the feature that lets you change your Gmail address.
Oh, thank goodness. A lifesaver for anyone who created their email address as a teenager and now needs something a little more professional.
Exactly. The rollout is starting in India, but it addresses a user need that has been requested for, almost 2 decades?
At least. Okay, let's shift gears now to a segment that looks at our past, our quest for justice, and the science of our own well-being. Let's start with a really remarkable discovery in North America, unearthing indigenous history and heritage.
This is a fantastic story. Along the Rappahannock River in Virginia, in the U.S., archaeologists, led by a woman named Julia King, have unearthed the distinct remnants of indigenous villages. And these are villages that were documented by the English colonist John Smith back in the early 1600s.
So they're finding physical structures and artifacts that line up exactly with these centuries-old maps.
Precisely. And the significance of this goes way beyond just preserving some old artifacts. For the Rappahannock tribe, this discovery is a profound cultural resurgence.
Because it validates their oral traditions, right?
Exactly.
The stories passed down through generations that colonizers often just dismissed or tried to erase.
It validates them completely. Finding these physical sites, especially along their ancestral river at places like Fones Cliffs, it strengthens the tribe's identity and their connection to the land in a very powerful, tangible way.
And what's really crucial here is the way they're doing the work. This is a model for a more restorative approach to heritage.
It is. The archaeologists are actively collaborating with the Rappahannock tribe. They're making sure that indigenous voices are prioritized in how their own history is interpreted, handled, and shared. It's a joint effort, and that's a big shift from how this work used to be done.
A much-needed shift. Okay, now on to accountability, or maybe the agonizing delay of it, in two major high-profile global cases. First, in the U.S., the Department of Justice and the delayed Epstein files.
Right. Just before the holidays, the DOJ revealed the discovery of over 1 million new documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein's network.
1 million. That's a staggering number. And that discovery has just thrown the whole public release timeline into chaos.
It's forced an immediate and indefinite delay. And the dilemma the DOJ is facing is immense. On one hand, they have to meticulously redact sensitive information to protect the privacy and safety of the victims. That's a vital and legally necessary step.
But that complex process is what's causing the delay, pushing it way past the deadline set by Congress.
Which has led to some serious political fallout. We've seen bipartisan frustration from senators accusing the DOJ of breaking the law by missing that deadline.
And the public sentiment is right there with them. There's this widespread, painful concern that we may never get full closure on who was complicit in Epstein's trafficking network, especially any high-profile figures who might be named in these new documents.
It's that classic agonizing tension, isn't it? The demand for government transparency clashing with the absolute necessity of victim protection. And every day of delay just fuels more public distrust and speculation, even if the reason for it is valid.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a very different story. A concrete victory for anti-corruption efforts in Southeast Asia. The conviction of former PM Najib Razak in Malaysia.
This is a pivotal moment for political accountability in the region. The former Malaysian prime minister was found guilty on new, serious charges related to that massive One Malaysia Development Berhad, or 1MDB, scandal.
This was specifically about money laundering and graft, on top of his previous convictions in the case.
Correct. And it just reinforces the legal system's willingness to hold even the most powerful figures accountable. It sends a crucial signal across the entire region that wealth and political position are not an absolute shield from the rule of law.
All right, let's pivot to public health. We'll start with a drug that has created some really unexpected sociological ripples: Ozempic and societal shifts.
Ozempic is, of course, a type 2 diabetes medication, but its off-label use for chronic weight management has just exploded because it's been shown to be so effective for many people.
It's important to stress, though, it's not universally approved for weight loss for everyone, and it has to be medically supervised.
Absolutely. But the ripple effect on people's personal lives has been fascinating to watch. The New York Times and other outlets have been reporting on its profound social impact, specifically on marriage and sexual relationships.
Also,
As one partner undergoes a really significant weight loss because of the drug, their body image and self-esteem can change dramatically, and that can alter the whole dynamic of a relationship, sometimes for the better, sometimes not.
you see a boost in confidence, but maybe also anxieties, jealousy, or shifts in attraction.
All of the above. It highlights how important communication is during a big physical and emotional transition like that. It's just a powerful example of how a pharmacological intervention can drive social change really, really quickly.
Now, moving to neurology, we have new scientific research that points to a more granular understanding of autism. Scientists have now identified 4 distinct types.
This is a really grounding and incredibly valuable finding. It moves us definitively beyond that historical one-size-fits-all approach to autism spectrum disorders. Researchers identified these 4 types by correlating specific genetic markers with distinct neurological and behavioral patterns.
So the implication here is massive. If you can categorize autism based on specific biological pathways, you're on the road to precision medicine.
That's exactly it. By understanding these specific biological subtypes, you can start developing much more tailored interventions, whether they're behavioral or pharmaceutical. And it should also significantly enhance diagnostic accuracy, which ultimately leads to better outcomes.
Next, a serious warning about our diets. Hidden dangers in processed food. New research is linking some very common food emulsifiers to chronic health issues.
The research focused on emulsifiers, like carboxymethylcellulose and polysorbate 80, and these things are everywhere. They're used in ice cream, sauces, baked goods, basically anything that needs a longer shelf life or a smoother texture.
And they've been shown to disrupt the gut microbiome. What are the consequences of that?
That disruption leads to chronic, low-grade inflammation and compromised metabolic health. And what's really disturbing is a study on mice showed that when the pregnant mothers consumed these emulsifiers, it increased their offspring's long-term susceptibility to obesity and related issues.
So a potential generational risk hidden in an ingredient that's just there to improve texture.
That's the concern. And finally, in health, a focus on transparency and public trust with vaccine ingredient scrutiny. Health officials are taking another look at the use of aluminum salts in vaccines.
Now, aluminum salts are adjuvants, right? They're in there to help boost the immune response and make the vaccine more effective.
They are. But officials are reassessing the risk and benefit profiles to directly address growing public concern and to be more transparent about vaccine ingredients. It's really a proactive step aimed at rebuilding and maintaining public trust in the face of ongoing global skepticism.
Okay, let's turn the dial from fundamental science to global strategy. We're jumping into the complex theater of global politics, starting with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The sources show a real flurry of high-stakes diplomatic activity right before the new year.
That's right. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced a critical upcoming meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump down in Florida. The stated purpose is to discuss a comprehensive peace plan that Zelensky has claimed is 90% ready.
This is a huge development, a part of a high-level U.S. diplomatic push to find a resolution to a conflict that has now dragged on for nearly 4 years. But, as you'd expect, we're already seeing contrasting narratives about the way forward.
Of course. On one hand, Russia's claiming that they're seeing slow but steady progress in their own parallel confidential negotiations with separate U.S. envoys. This suggests there might be multiple diplomatic channels working at once.
But on the other hand, Moscow is actively dismissing the details of Zelensky's proposed 20-point peace plan that were leaked to Bloomberg.
Yes, Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman came out and criticized Bloomberg for spreading what she called fake news, and she really stressed that sensitive diplomatic talks need to stay confidential to have any chance of success. It just highlights how difficult this is, especially when you have non-negotiable issues like Russia's stance on its territorial claims in the Donbas.
And all of this is being complicated by significant internal Ukrainian concerns back in Kyiv.
A recent poll revealed some really serious skepticism within the country. A staggering 44% of Ukrainians said they doubt that any elections, if they were held, would be fair. And that was primarily due to fears of fraud, especially with online voting.
And even worse, 40% of the people polled believe President Zelensky himself is involved in corruption. That level of internal skepticism about your own government, it really undermines the national unity you need to fight a war of defense.
And on the physical front, there are urgent infrastructure problems. There is a critical and urgent need for repairs at the new safe confinement structure at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant.
That's the massive steel arch they built over the destroyed reactor.
That's the one. It was damaged by a Russian drone strike. The director there said it could take several years and a huge amount of international funding to fully restore that protective cover.
The threat remains highly kinetic, which is highlighted by the continued and rapid escalating regional militarization.
Very much so. The Belarusian defense minister, Viktor Krinin, has come out and claimed that European NATO countries, he specifically named Poland, Germany, and France, are openly preparing for war.
And his justification for that claim?
He's citing the significant increases in NATO defense spending. He noted some nations are allocating 5% of their GDP to defense, which he characterizes as a pre-war budget. And Belarus's response has been the deployment of nuclear-capable Oreshik missiles as a deterrent.
So the rhetoric is extremely high. And we're seeing direct evidence of these tensions in the skies, too.
We are. On Christmas morning, Polish jets were scrambled to intercept a Russian reconnaissance aircraft over the Baltic Sea, and Polish radar also tracked unidentified objects, later thought to be smuggling balloons, coming into their airspace from Belarus, which prompted temporary airspace closures. It's a very nervous, high-alert situation up there.
Okay, shifting focus to the Middle East, The Israeli settlement controversy is escalating, and it's drawing immediate condemnation from international allies.
Key nations like the UK, Canada, and Germany all expressed strong condemnation of Israel's approval of 19 new settlements in the occupied West Bank.
And their argument is that this is a violation of international law.
Yes, they view the expansion as a blatant violation of international law and a significant, maybe even fatal blow to the viability of a future two-state solution. Their collective statement called the actions counterproductive to peace.
And what was Israel's response?
The Israeli Foreign Ministry robustly defended the decision. They asserted a Jewish right to live in those territories and cited the 1917 Balfour Declaration as a foundational justification. It just highlights that deep historical and political chasm that any negotiation has to try and cross.
And all this political strife is happening alongside a dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Pope Leo IV specifically condemned the escalating situation there with the ongoing Israeli blockade and the harsh winter conditions. He called for immediate, massive international aid to help the civilian population.
And yet, even in the midst of that hardship, we saw moments of resilience. The Christmas celebrations in Bethlehem were framed by Palestinian Christians as a peaceful act of defiance.
An act of resilience against the occupation. But the volatility on the ground continues. We saw reports of an Israeli settler running over a Palestinian man who was praying near Ramallah. These small, devastating incidents are happening all the time.
Now, turning east, North Korea's military drive is moving forward at a very aggressive, very public pace. Kim Jong-un has ordered officials to massively ramp up missile and artillery shell production.
And he's explicitly framing it as a war deterrent against what he perceives as threats. This comes right after his inspection of a huge 8,700-ton nuclear-powered submarine that's reportedly nearing completion.
And a nuclear-powered submarine is a major strategic asset. It's about survivability and power projection.
It is, and at the same time, Kim explicitly condemned South Korea's own ambitions to develop nuclear-powered subs, saying that it's just exacerbating regional instability. The tension there is palpable, especially with reports that North Korea has been providing significant military support to Russia.
And just quickly, we also saw renewed clashes between Thailand and Cambodia over border disputes, with precarious ceasefire talks being undermined when Cambodia accused Thailand of indiscriminate attacks, even while the talks were happening.
It just shows how fragile these diplomatic efforts can be.
This whole patchwork of global instability forces us to look at the role of the U.S. and the structure of these international alliances. The United Nations Human Rights Office, ACNUDH, has weighed in on the U.S. pressure on Venezuela, declaring the Venezuela blockade illegal.
The ACNUDH report really underscores the negative impact of the U.S. military blockade on the Venezuelan economy, saying it's exacerbating severe shortages of food and medicine for civilians. The UN's position is that these kinds of sanctions shouldn't compromise basic human rights.
And that kind of pressure, predictably, is pushing Venezuela towards stronger alliances with countries outside the Western sphere.
Of course. The Venezuelan government has publicly thanked Russia for strategic military backing, and Iran has also expressed solidarity. They're positioning themselves together against what they see as U.S. aggression.
And that tension became very real, very kinetic, when a tanker was reported as having defied the U.S. Coast Guard blockade off the Venezuelan coast.
A direct challenge to U.S. policy enforcement. And all of this instability really ties into a broader structural analysis that Trump's America First policy and international law are fundamentally reshaping global diplomacy.
There was an opinion piece making the rounds arguing that the administration's transactional nationalist ideology has really undermined the whole rules-based international order.
That's the system of treaties and conventions that has governed global interaction since World War II. The argument is that prioritizing unilateral advantage over multilateral agreements is changing the game.
And that analysis feeds directly into the growing counterforce that we see from organizations like BRICS. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, OCS.
These groups highlight the emergence of a truly multipolar world. And the strength of that China-Russia relationship was made very clear by the Russian ambassador, who said it has reached a historic level in both trade and security cooperation. It's a monumental challenge to the old unipolar Western-led structure.
Let's pivot now to the global economy and the environmental pressures that are shaping investment, starting with a pretty unhinged pre-holiday surge in the precious metals rally.
It really was unhinged. Silver topped a staggering $75 an ounce, and both gold and platinum hit record highs. This shows deep investor confidence in hard assets when there's so much geopolitical uncertainty and inflation pressure.
And this is a major market signal. Some strategists are already forecasting that gold could hit US $5,000 by 2026. This is gold's best sustained performance since the late 1970s under Jimmy Carter. It really indicates a profound flight to safety in the markets.
On the domestic front in the U.S., a quick snapshot. The average long-term mortgage rate ticked down just a little bit to 6.18%, a small drop but significant for anyone trying to afford a home right now.
And in terms of U.S. labor policy, a controversial ruling was upheld. U.S. District Judge Beryl Howell kept the massive $100,000 fee on new H-1B visa applications.
This is a major financial blow for tech firms who rely really heavily on skilled foreign workers for specialized jobs.
And the ruling is clearly aligned with the administration's stated goal of prioritizing U.S. workers and having stricter immigration controls.
It is. But the tech firms are arguing that this fee is just going to stifle essential innovation and hurt their ability to compete globally for the best talent in fields like AI and advanced computing.
Speaking of labor issues, we saw a very specific disruption in Colorado. The famous Telluride ski resort had to close right before the peak holiday season.
That closure was triggered by a strike from the Ski Patrol Union. They've been in stalled salary negotiations since June. It just highlights these broader industry-wide challenges around fair pay and unionization in the winter sports market, a huge economic blow for that region right before Christmas.
We really need to look closely at the trade-offs in the green energy transition, starting with the philosophy from UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. They're pushing this concept of industrialization without destruction.
It's all about balancing rapid economic growth, especially in developing nations, with environmental responsibility. The managing director stressed that modern industrial policy has to include decarbonization, resource efficiency, and energy conservation, all tailored to local needs.
The goal is to shift the perception of industry from being the polluter to being a sustainable partner in hitting climate goals.
But the reality of that rapid green adoption brings its own serious problems. Just look at the solar waste crisis in India. The solar energy boom there has been incredible for their climate goals, but it's creating a massive impending wave of toxic waste.
Right, because solar panels have a finite lifespan, 25 to 30 years, and they're full of heavy metals like cadmium and lead.
And if you just dump them in a landfill, those toxic materials can leach into the soil and the water table. It's a huge environmental trade-off that we haven't really planned for properly.
So there's an urgent need for policy reform and massive investment in recycling infrastructure to deal with this crisis before it gets completely out of hand.
There is, but at the same time, India is celebrating a significant green milestone. Over 90 of their airports now operate entirely on green energy using solar and other renewables. It shows a real forward-thinking approach to sustainable infrastructure, even as they face the waste problem.
And globally, we're seeing great examples of reweighting green energy by repurposing old industrial sites. The 70-year-old Chapel Cross nuclear power plant site in the UK is being transformed into a big hub for wind and solar.
It's a fantastic model for how to pivot these old, sometimes contaminated industrial sites toward viable, sustainable alternatives for the future.
All right, let's touch on a few smaller but insightful economic and commercial notes. In Hong Kong, a massive tourism surge over the festive season.
Guest house rates hit a 5-year high, occupancy expected over 90%. But there was a specific criticism that came along with that good news.
I saw that. The government promotions are focusing too much on the high-end luxury hotels and not really showcasing the affordable lodging options.
Which potentially alienates budget-conscious travelers. On the innovation front, a startup called Nowhere won an award for its green weed control tech.
That sounds interesting. What is it?
It's a system that uses 100% water, combined with robotics and AI, to target and eliminate weeds without any harmful chemical herbicides. A huge step for sustainable agriculture.
That's incredible. And finally, a really unusual statistic about trade with Russia. Despite all the sanctions, the European Union actually recorded a trade surplus of $1.5 billion with Russia in the third quarter of 2025.
And this is the first time the EU has had consecutive quarterly surpluses with Russia since 2002. It suggests a really complicated financial reality under the sanctions, where certain essential European goods are still getting into the Russian market.
Our final segment covers crucial domestic and cultural stories, beginning with a very volatile political situation in Central America. We're talking about the Honduras electoral coup allegations.
Right. The Supreme Electoral Council, or CNE, of Honduras declared the Trump-backed candidate, Nasri Asfura, as the winner of the presidential election. and this decision was met with immediate and widespread backlash.
The controversy is all about allegations of widespread electoral fraud and irregularities. Many observers are calling it an electoral coup.
And this raises really deep concerns among Honduran organizations about the return of the National Party to power. The party has historical ties to corruption, and there's a real fear of a severe erosion of their already fragile democratic institutions.
Moving to the U.S. political theater. During the holidays, we saw the continuation of the decades-long tradition of the NORAD Santa Tracker calls.
Yes, President Trump and the First Lady participated, taking calls from children across the country. And in his characteristic style, he commended one child for requesting a Kindle, calling it a high IQ gift request.
A moment of holiday cheer mixed with his unique commentary. At the same time, he's continuing his public media warfare. He specifically went after the late-night host Stephen Colbert after CBS canceled his show, citing financial reasons.
Trump accused Colbert of running on hatred and fumes and used the cancellation to reiterate his long-standing threat to revoke the broadcast licenses of networks that he believes are unfairly critical of him.
And on the flip side of that, we saw Jimmy Kimmel's critique aired to a global audience. He delivered a very pointed alternative Christmas message on Channel 4 in the UK.
And it was a stark, powerful warning about the potential rise of authoritarianism in the U.S. He used the holiday message to frame a very serious political warning about democratic fragility.
And finally, a grim story from South Asia, highlighting severe Indian communal tensions. A Bengali Muslim migrant worker was tragically lynched in the Sambalpur district of Odisha.
He was lynched over suspicions that he was a Bangladeshi national. And this violent incident prompted Iltija Mufti, the daughter of a former chief minister, to provocatively refer to India as Lynchistan on social media, expressing profound outrage and concern for the safety of minorities and migrants.
Let's discuss immediate security threats and actions around the globe. Russia's Federal Security Service, the FSB, has been very active in counterterrorism efforts.
They're citing several recent plots they've foiled, and they're highlighting this ongoing hybrid conflict. In one really disturbing account, the FSB reported apprehending an 18-year-old Russian woman in Stavropol.
And she was coerced by Ukrainian special services through a sophisticated phone scam.
That's what the FSB is reporting. They say she was misled into believing she had to plant an improvised explosive device on a military vehicle to avoid criminal charges. It highlights a grim new front in this war, directly targeting civilian vulnerabilities through coercion.
In Africa, the U.S. military conducted strikes against Islamic State, or IS, positions in Nigeria. But the operation was complicated by the political messaging around it.
It was. President Trump asserted the strikes were specifically targeting Christians, but the Nigerian foreign minister clarified that it was a joint operation and stressed the strikes were strictly against IS fighters and were not religiously motivated.
And elsewhere, authorities were on high alert over the holidays. Turkish authorities arrested 115 suspects linked to IS, who were allegedly planning attacks on non-Muslims during Christmas and New Year's celebrations.
And in South Africa, a mass shooting at a tavern led to 11 arrests. And that violence is being linked to escalating turf wars among illegal mining operations in the region, where these disputes often erupt into deadly confrontations.
Finally, we wrap up with culture and the resilience that shines through all this global turbulence. King Charles III delivered his Christmas Day speech, which emphasized reconciliation and compassion.
And the message really resonated. The broadcast was the most watched program on Christmas Day, with nearly 7 million viewers. He consciously focused on themes of unity and service, reinforcing the monarch's symbolic role as a source of national stability. Culturally, we also saw a surprising market trend in Russia. A massive price increase, up 80%, for vintage Soviet-era Christmas ornaments.
It's a fascinating trend. It reflects this deep, complex cultural reconnection with the past. These scarce, often handmade ornaments are tangible links to a time that was politically charged, but also evokes these familial memories. It's the commercialization of nostalgia.
And we also have to pause to note the passing of a significant figure in rock music. Mick Abrahams, a founding member of the iconic British band Jethro Tull.
He passed away at 82. He was known for his distinctive style that blended progressive rock, folk, and blues, and he influenced generations of musicians. And finally, a small note on tradition versus safety. Several festive sea swims in the UK, in Devon and Cornwall, were cancelled due to strong wind warnings. A disappointing but necessary choice to prioritize safety over tradition. What an incredible amount of information we synthesized for you today. We started at the absolute frontier of knowledge, talking about the new reality of an intelligent universe, the implications of corralled supercooled liquid, and breakthroughs in quantum tech and altermagnets.
These are the changes that are going to physically reshape the world we live in, and then we dove right into the diplomatic tightrope walks, that 90% ready peace plan for Ukraine, the escalating security concerns in orbit, the challenges to the international order, and the persistent problems of global accountability.
From the agonizing delays in the Epstein files to the successes of anti-corruption efforts in Malaysia, we've seen this incredible, dizzying speed of technological advancement, epitomized by quantum devices the size of a microchip. And yet, here we are, still grappling with conflicts based on 17th century ideas of territory and 20th century geopolitical structures.
And that contrast, that tension, it raises our final provocative thought for you to consider as you move into 2026. What does it actually mean for us, for humanity, that we can manipulate matter at the nanoscale? We can build entirely new states of existence and design chips that defy classical physics.
And yet, we still struggle so profoundly to manage information overload, to make sound decisions in complex, high-pressure environments. As illustrated by all the research we see on political corruption, democratic skepticism, and our own ingrained cognitive biases.
Which is the truer, more consequential frontier for us to conquer right now? Is it outer space and the quantum realm, or is it the vast, turbulent complexities of our shared political and neurological landscapes?
Something to chew on as you move into the new year, fully informed.
You're enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.